My name is Diana Lopez, and this is Medusa's Awakening Podcast. Hello, everybody. Welcome to episode 5 of Medusa's Awakening Podcast. Today, I have a special guest for everybody. Her name is Maritza Quinones, and we are here celebrating Hispanic Heritage Month. So, hello to all my gente, and hello, Maritza. How are you doing today?
Hello, hola, ¿cómo
Oh,
están?
okay,
Pretty
well,
good.
yeah, good.
Excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I mean, this to me is a very important to talk about because, you know, growing up, um, either being one race or another, it is people always tend to kind of come at you like, what are you? Like, are you black? Are you Hispanic? Are you Asian? You know, like, what are you? But there's so many of us. And I say us because I'm half white and half Peruvian. So that mix, there's so many of us that are mixed, but there's so many people who always want you to choose a side. So I feel like it's kind of important that we kind of dive into the day in the life of an Afro-Latina growing up, family dynamic, yada, yada, yada. How are you feeling about that?
Sounds great. Yeah. I don't want this to sound, I don't want to offend your
Mm,
father, but I sometimes I forget that you're part Peruvian and part Caucasian.
yeah, yeah.
Because
So
you got that cultura going on,
I know
so.
there's too much Peruvian blood running through these veins.
Yeah.
For sure. Um, so okay, so let's get started. So tell us, what was your family dynamic?
Ah, my family dynamic. Well, clearly my family was led by the matriarch, my abuelita,
Mm,
and my mother and her sister, my aunt. Those are the three women in my life. So
they
basically, I
sound
was I was raised by three women,
that's amazing.
three really strong women.
Yeah. So
Um,
how was it that so are you and your sister first generation?
yeah, we're first generation immigrants.
Okay.
Mhm.
So what's the story of your family's background? Like coming from Colombia?
Woo.
Like who was it that brought the family here?
Yeah. Um, the story as I know it, as I've been told over the years, is
Mhm.
the first one to come was my grandmother's brother, Jorge.
Oh.
In Colombia, they were shoemakers.
Oh, nice.
But when Jorge came to the Bronx, he opened a shoe repair shop.
Mhm.
And so Jorge was the first one to come, and he married a black woman, Mabel,
Mhm.
and they lived in the Bronx. And then after that, his brother Jacobito came, and then Abuelita came. Abuelita came with my aunt, who came to go to nursing school. And my mother was the last one, actually, to
Oh.
come to New York. My mother did not want to come to New York. She wanted to stay in Colombia. But my grandmother was like, no, you're not staying here unless you're married. You're not staying here by yourself unless you're married.
Mm,
So in
mhm.
walks my father, and
She was like, "Ta-da! Instant."
yeah. So I
Oh.
don't know. I don't know how rushed it was, but
Mm.
the funny thing is that once my mother was married and then she was 8 months pregnant with my sister, she ended up leaving my father, ditching him, and coming to New York. Um, and it was 5 years after that that my father was able to make it back to New York. And that's why my sister and I are 6 years apart.
Oh,
Because when
that's
my
why.
father
Okay.
finally made it back to New York,
Uh-huh.
he was still married to my mother, and my grandmother, that matriarch, Abuelita, she's like,
Uh-huh.
that's your husband. He's still your husband.
Wow. Yeah.
So
Right.
the irony about my mother
Mm-hmm.
initially not wanting to leave Colombia to go to follow her
Yeah.
sister and her mother in New York, the irony is that when she finally got to New York, she never went back to Colombia. Like she never wanted to go back. She never stepped foot. My mother was in love with New York.
Oh,
New
yeah.
York was her town. And my father, on the other hand, when he made it back 5 years later,
Mhm.
and was in, he thought it was, he hated it. He didn't like it, but he was there because, my mother just kind of took off. And because he was gone for those first 5 years, he didn't have a relationship with my sister.
Oh, wow.
So
Yeah.
my
Yeah.
sister's father was my padrino, my aunt's husband.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Um,
Yeah.
and so when my father did come along and I came along, he was here in New York for my birth. And so we bonded, we connected in a way that he and my sister didn't. So the family dynamic, it was very, growing up, it was always, your father's here. Um, and it wasn't until later as an adult that my sister finally like fixed that relationship with my father. Um,
Oh, that's good.
yeah.
Yeah. And so growing up, was there any talk in the household about being Afro-Latina? Like, um,
No.
when everybody's like, everybody's own home, everybody just assumes that it's like normal. Whatever is
Yeah.
in their home is normal, is like out everywhere else. So did you have this thing about every African American, the person that you saw was maybe Latino, or did you already kind of know that there was a difference? Like, was that talked about?
Oh, like it's interesting. Growing up, I could tell the difference.
Mm-hmm.
Um, just
Because you saw it every day, right?
because
Like,
because I saw it
yeah.
every day, but even though we were the same skin color, the
Mm-hmm.
culture, it, we were speaking Spanish. We were eating rice and beans. They were, the culture was different. And so I actually honestly never started using the term Afro-Latina until a few years ago because growing up, we just didn't need to. Everyone around us was Dominican, Cuban, Puerto Rican, and they
Yeah.
were as
Mm-hmm.
light as you and as darker than me. So it was just common. So it was never that we had to put a term because it was obvious, you're black.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then the music. Um,
Yeah.
that salsa, that Afro beat. So yeah, it was just obvious.
Yeah.
And we had our family dynamic. We had friends who were all those things, and they
Yeah.
were all those things. And even like in Colombia, we had family that looked Asian even.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah. So you would say that growing up then, because you had so many people to compare to, like so many people that looked like you and were, spoke Spanish and had the same cultural um things that you grew up with, kind of shaped the way that you felt, and it was inclusive for you
oh
then.
yeah, that everyone I went to school with
Hmm.
was Puerto Rican and black. There was a handful of, this is the 70s, so there was still some Italian and Irish then, but the majority of what I was surrounded with was Puerto Rican and black. Um, uh, Hispanic and black, sorry. But yeah, Puerto Rican, the Bronx is full of
Yeah.
Puerto Ricans,
Yeah.
which I learned later, like all the Colombians are in Queens. And I was like, how did we end up in the Bronx? But it was because your Jorge with the shoe repair shop, he was married to a black woman and
um
she was in the Bronx. They had a beautiful house in the North Bronx that my father ended up living in her first floor apartment after he died. But there's this weird connection because my father actually knew my abuelita before he met my mother. My
oh,
abuelita introduced my father to my mother.
so your abuelita was like straight up matchmaker, huh?
Yes.
That's so cool.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So growing up with strong women, and you yourself, like, it totally makes sense. Like, you are a very strong, right? You have a very strong, feisty, fiery personality, the typical
What are you trying
Latin
to say?
personality. I'm walking here. um how do you what was instilled in you as a child with those strong women archetypes?
Man, it's seeing, I mean, my mother was basically a single mom. My parents divorced
Mhm.
when I was 5. And while they managed to stay friends, civil,
Mhm.
my mom did the bulk of the hard work, as most women did back then,
Yeah.
70s. Um, and I watched her just do the damn thing,
Yeah.
but
It
not
is
by
still.
herself. Not by
Oh.
herself. Those other 2 women, Abuelita and my aunt,
Mhm.
these women were in my life every day. My mother and I and my sister, we lived in the projects. Um, the projects just a few blocks away from where my aunt and my cousins lived, in a
Mhm.
house. And up the street from that house was our elementary school. So I would walk from the projects, go to my aunt's house in the morning where Abuelita was already, have breakfast with my cousins, and then we'd all walk up the hill to school. And then after school, we walk down the hill, hang out
Mhm.
on my cousins. My mother would come pick me up after work. So I mean, we were together a lot.
No, yeah, no, that
It
sounds
was a
like,
village. It wasn't
yeah.
just, it was my I remember my cousin Pico, he would like make fun of my mother. Like she'd come after work and my aunt would like put stuff in her bag, like, here, mijita, here, cójalo, cójalo. No, 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 no. I hear my cousin Pico be like, oh, you're shopping again? You grocery shopping in our house again? But you know,
Yeah.
he had a mother and a father. My uncle had a job. He was an electrical engineer, and they had a nice house with a pool, and that's where we spent most of
Oh,
our time. And my
wow.
mother was, so even though I was over here in the projects, just
Yeah.
literally, Lopez, 4 blocks away. The project's over here, and there my cousins living in the house over here.
That's
But
perfect.
but it was
I
great.
that is that is so incredible to hear because it is so necessary. Like I wish everybody kind of had that experience where they
Growing
grew
up with
up.
your
Yeah,
man,
and just it
I
sounded
wouldn't
like,
change it for a thing.
right? It
And
sounded
my
like you grew
sister's
up in
doing that now.
protection too. Like you
Oh
grew up in
yeah.
protection, you grew up surrounded by people who were like-minded like you. You had a family dynamic that was all encompassing. Like we take care of everybody. It's not that that's just your kid, the type of situation. So that that is so incredible to hear. I mean, I know, you hear stories about Afro-Latinas that, Afro-Latinos that, kind of grow up not really fitting in. There is this kind of, the same way I kind of grew up. I never had a friend who was
Biracial.
biracial. It was in a sense that I was, because I was either too white to be Hispanic or too Hispanic to be with the whites, and so like there wasn't
Wow.
a place for me, so to speak.
Mhm.
And so that was really kind of hard to navigate. And so I kind of found it, um that almost like I had to choose sides. You know,
Yeah, I could see
I
that.
yeah, that I had to choose a
And did
side.
you?
So a lot of times I would just flip-flop.
Did you code switch? They call it that code switching now. I'm
Yeah.
like, oh, okay, it has a
Oh,
name.
that's a new term. Yeah, yeah. So I
We
code
didn't know it back
switched
then. Mhm.
because, I never, you know, I never was taught, like, I was taught to stand firm in your beliefs, stand strong. My mom was always, like you're like the women in your family, right? Strong. She came here from Peru when she was in her 20s, not knowing any English, and
Did she
then
come by herself?
mhm. And she found her community. She found other
Okay,
Peruanas.
wait. Your mother came to America. She didn't have that support, that blanket here, that support system already
I
here.
think she maybe had one friend that she knew was here.
Wow. See, that to me is way more impressive than what my mom did. I mean, she
No,
just came, her sister, her mother, her uncles, everything was already here. All she had to do was pack a bag.
but you know what? That's the thing right there, though, right? All you have to do, that is so hard. She didn't want to
That
leave
is
Colombia. right? She didn't want to because it's scary, right? You're coming over here, not knowing the language. Yeah, you do have your family here. There is a sense of security and safety in that, in some cases. But there's also that leaving everything you know. Because how old was your mother, do you think, when she
Oh gosh, she
Mhm.
was early 20s.
Yeah, right.
Hmm.
Could you imagine in your early 20s somebody saying to you, I need you to pack up all your shit and move to fuck, I don't know,
Well,
Europe or something,
yeah.
like
Well, in my early 20s, well, you did it. In my early 20s, I moved from New York to Seattle. I was
yeah.
23. And I didn't know shit. I didn't know anybody there. I knew one
Yeah, same.
person who was living in New York who was like, "Oh yeah, go to Seattle and meet so and so." I was like, "Okay." Um,
Yeah, that's kind of, just that first step to get over here or
so how
to
did your mother
um,
decide? So where did she end up? Where did she land?
I think she was in Florida for like a hot minute, but like ultimately the majority of her time was here in California. So she found a little apartment, back in those days, right? There's always these apartments for women,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. For only
single
women.
women.
Yes.
Yeah, for single women. Um, so she wound up, you know, finding that and then finding, like I said, finding her community, my madrina. And she wound up becoming BFFs with her. And,
But how did
was
she made it from
also,
Florida to California?
yeah, yeah. She just,
Lopez, you could have been East
I know.
Coast. But I love West Coast
Uh,
Lopez.
yeah, me too. So yeah, I mean, but that's what builds
Character.
the character, the strong. She had to do this, right? She had to do this for herself. Um, so okay, so let's talk about what a lot of people like to talk about these days is finding something that, like on TV, people that represent you on TV. Um,
Well, now it's a lot easier.
right, but back then, and we had such beautiful people. I mean, we have beautiful people now, especially, when we were in our teens and growing up in the 20, in our 20s and things like that, right? Well, let's start off with the queen herself, right? Celia Cruz.
Mm,
First of all, like she was the big, right, staple.
yeah.
Like she represented it like to the max. And
Mm.
you're from New York, Rosie Perez, there's right. Like, so when you see that, to you, it's like, yeah, of course, right? Like but for so many, they just don't have that. They don't have that connection. They don't, they
Well,
chose a
it's
side, or so to speak.
well, like with the modeling, I'll use the modeling as an
Okay.
example. My
Yeah.
mother wanted me to get into modeling when I was a teenager. I didn't want to do it. I didn't give a shit about it, but whatever. New York, you're a dime a dozen. There's a beautiful face on every
Mm.
fucking street corner.
I can imagine. Yeah. Yeah.
So, I did the thing. I tried to this and this and that. I went to Ford. I went to Wilhelmina. I went to all the major agencies. I tried to get some decent pictures. Nada.
Oh, yeah.
It wasn't until I moved to Seattle where, hello,
I know.
there's there's
Yeah.
I was
Yeah.
like, who's that girl?
Yeah.
So it was a little easier to break in. So then I got this and I got that. But it still never really took off because I never really wanted it to take off. And also, I had a full-time job, but things happened here that wouldn't happen in New York because in New York there's
Yeah.
just too many people and everybody's beautiful and
That's where
I'm not
they
saying
all
that there
like
aren't
to go
beautiful.
to.
Yeah, it was just
Well, and for
there aren't
the
just
listeners out there, this woman right here can literally just, if she has your back to you and you go, Maritza, turn around, and she turns around and you snap a picture, instant magazine cover. Like, I
oh
swear to
please.
God, you are so photogenic. It drives me insane. I was like, I
Yeah.
need the Maritza filter
What?
where
What?
everything is like, perfect. Like just splash, and then
It's
you're
not though.
okay, so going to Seattle, right? Like you went to
Mhm.
Seattle way early on too, or 80s,
90,
90s.
1990.
Mm-hmm. And at the time, Seattle, Washington, it wasn't like droves of people like there is now, right? Like
Yeah.
I was a transplant,
What year did you
um
go?
2005,
Oh,
and I
wow.
feel like even then there were people moving, but it wasn't like how it is now. Like I think even my time there, after a certain point, maybe I don't know, 7-10 years in, is when I started to notice more and more of a variety of people, because predominantly Seattle was predominantly white. So when you moved there in the 90s, like how was that for you? Did you feel like you needed to explain more often than not, like your culture,
All the
people
time.
trying to represent
All the
you?
time.
Yeah. So
All the time. For them, and I'm sorry, there's just a lot of ignorance, but not just
mhm,
among Caucasians, ignorance
right.
among your own Latino people, ignorance, out there. There was a lot of Mexicans. That's why I first encountered.
Hmm.
Even they are like,
Huh? Yeah.
how do you
Hmm.
know Spanish? I'm like, wow.
Yeah. Yeah. Because
Um,
when people think of Latinos, they
yeah,
think,
they think of Jennifer Lopez and Salma Hayek and
hmm,
Sofia Vergara and
hmm,
they think of the
traditional, right?
Shakira, the traditional looking, whatever that means. I hate that word, traditional,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
yeah. But
Yeah.
yeah,
So then you would think that, so do you think that the treatment that you experienced away from New York was kind of like this eye opening, like eye awakening, like how come you guys don't get it? Like you grew up in an area surrounded by people, neighborhoods, community, that everybody got it. You didn't even need to explain it. And now here you are. How old were you in the in
I
19?
was 23 when I moved here. I mean, there.
So at 23 years old, you go over to Seattle, Washington, and you're like having to explain this. Are you kind of like dumbfounded, like why don't you guys get it? Or are you just kind of
I,
like,
I really was, but again, coming from New York City, it is the melting pot of the world.
mm-hmm.
So, but I should have, I don't know what I expected. I mean, it's the Pacific Rim. So
Yeah.
there, I don't know. I don't know. And I'll tell you a story. Yes, it was hard to find Latinos when I first got there. And so I would make friends with Black women. And
Mm-hmm.
I met this woman she worked at Barney's New York on Fifth Avenue in Seattle,
Mm-hmm.
downtown. And I walked in there and I saw her behind the counter and she was beautiful, Black, elegant,
Mm-hmm.
and because when Black people
Yeah.
is here, you lock eyes, you're like,
Mm. Mm-hmm.
and we just boom, lock, step, got to know each other. Um, Really sweet person. She was originally from the South, from North Carolina, I want to say.
Mm-hmm.
So through her, she introduced me to some of her Black friends in Seattle. Wonderful women, smart, educated. I felt completely out of place
Yeah.
because they were HBCU women. I mean, they went to, Howard and Spelman and Morehouse and all, and I, I went to
Yeah.
high school. And so they never made me feel um
Inferior or any of that.
right,
Mm-hmm.
right. But I felt that I felt it because I didn't have that same experience, not just the collegial experience, the
Right.
cultural experience.
Yeah.
These women were from the South. They were Black women
Mm-hmm.
culturally. They grew up eating um, black eyed peas and collard greens and all the stuff that I didn't eat growing up until
Yeah.
later. And so culturally, it was just like, it was like trying to put a square peg into a round hole.
Yeah.
it just didn't fit. And I kept trying, and there were nice women, but it just never connected. But I met you bitches.
Yeah.
And I mean, even though Korean is way over here from
Right.
Hispanic, but it's like it's the vibe, it's the energy, it's the fire. It's
Right. Right.
so I found a different tribe,
Right.
but that tribe I tried to fit in, and I just didn't, and I ended up, we slowly, you know how friendships go. Nothing bad happened among us. It was
Right.
just
Right.
slowly, you
Slowly.
kind of
Just not.
I
Yeah.
I
Hmm.
got married, and I was pregnant with Milan, and the black girl that I met,
Hmm.
Beatrice, that was her name.
Mm-hmm.
Beatrice, she gave me my baby shower, and when I came home
Oh,
from the
that's so sweet.
hospital, she decorated my house, and I mean, it was a
Oh.
wonderful friendship for that time, and then it was over, you
Yeah.
know?
And that, and that's okay, because a lot of times you're surrounded by people in the moment that you need them, or they need you. And
Mhm.
then when that doesn't, when it's, no longer, not that it was a necessity in a way, but it was, at that time you needed that. You were trying to find your tribe, like you said, you were trying
Yeah,
to find the people that were going to keep you grounded, that you were going to be comfortable around. And everybody is different. Like everybody, they just like you served a purpose for them in that moment, they served a purpose for you in that moment. So,
mhm.
and oftentimes it's okay to let go of friendships like that without, and it doesn't have to be anything crazy that, shit just blows up, explodes, you guys get into a huge fight, and it doesn't always have to be like that. It could literally just go away peacefully, quietly, and it doesn't necessarily represent that you found anything at fault with them, or they found anything
Yeah.
at fault with you. You know what I
And
mean?
you know what I loved about that short, I mean, short, it was maybe probably a year or two. So it
Mm-hmm.
was a few years of friendship. Was that unless I had that experience, I wouldn't have learned about educated Black women in the
Mm-hmm.
way that I did by knowing them, you know?
Right.
Back then, I didn't know. I mean, I went to fucking Catholic high school in the Bronx.
Right.
Everybody that I knew either went to, city college or, you know, didn't go to college, trade school.
Right.
And here's a group of these, Black women and I
Right.
was just like, that's powerful. Um,
And that's great, because you growing up, but do you see how, like, you growing up surrounded by strong women, and that is what you are attracted to, right? Like you attract to
yeah.
those, so you attract those, and then you are attracted to those, that's, and that is
Like mines,
like minds.
because
So would you think that that would be a source, though, like, so when it comes to racism, colorism, things like that, do you kind of go back to that? Does that, being around strong women, being raised by strong women, was that your source of empowerment when you were facing kind of colorism and racism? Because I know, oftentimes, and not just, let's not just put Washington. Racism and colorism happens even in every big city, right? New York, California, right? LA, like, it's just the way it is. So is that what you kind of pulled in um when you were faced with something like that? And, like, was there a time that it kind of came to a head for you, and you just kind of was like, I can't deal with this shit anymore. Like, from here on out, I'm just going to cuss people out.
well, I always want to cut people out.
I know.
I was just telling Peter, I said, I think I'm gonna just have to start staying home. It's really for other people's safety
Yeah, right.
because
I know.
I know this is gonna sound weird because I know that so many people experience racism, and maybe I'm just naive to it or numb to it. I hope neither.
Mhm.
But when someone asks me about my experiences with racism or
Mhm.
colorism, I can only think of two examples in my
Okay.
entire life.
Okay.
And there's the one at the front end of my life when I was probably in second or third grade.
Oh, okay.
And
Yeah.
then one in my adult life when I was already living in Seattle.
Mm-hmm.
And the third grade episode was Lisa Matos. She was one of them light-skinned Puerto Rican girls with a
Okay.
really racist grandfather.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And she always had a birthday party around Halloween because her birthday was near Halloween. So it was always a Halloween themed birthday party.
Mm-hmm.
And, I guess I didn't know that expression back then. FOMO. Never,
Oh,
never got
right.
invited. Never got invited. And neither did any of the other like darkies. So I
Yeah.
was like, okay.
So
Um,
that was something that you picked up on.
I
Was
picked up on it. And then I
oh,
learned, and then it got confirmed by other experiences, by other friends that are still friends today. And
mhm.
then, but it didn't, I mean, it bothered me, it affected me, but I also just kind of was like, oh, well, there was still plenty examples of people who looked like me,
And and we're accepting.
and were accepting because they look
Right.
like me.
Right. But it was that I, it sucks when kids have to experience that, but
Damn,
you
I'm
don't
still
need.
holding on to that.
Yeah. Okay, well, we're going to do a healing session today on Medusa's Awakening podcast. Let's let that go.
And then the other experience was when I was already living in Seattle, and you know how you go to the park and ride and you ride the bus with the same people every day and you kind of see them every day and you go,
Yeah.
hey, what's up? And there was this woman, and she was Jewish, and I know she was Jewish because we talked about it. We were talking about her being from Detroit. But
Right.
one day we were talking and she goes, "Oh, why do you live up here? Why I would think that you'd want to live somewhere, down south where there's other people of I think she said of color or people who look like you, something like that." And
Oh,
it was
interesting.
morning and it was like early and I was like, I can't believe this bitch just said this to me, but
Yeah.
I mean, it's just stupid. It
Yeah.
was just dumb. It's just
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
we're not a monolith. We don't Just because we're Hispanic doesn't mean we need to be with other Hispanic people.
Right. We can live
We can
out
live
here in the
anywhere.
wild.
We live in the wild. We live in the suburbs too. Not just white people in the suburbs.
Look at us Latino folks. We own houses too.
Thank you. Oh my God.
We own our cars too. Yeah. Yeah. I 1,000%, agree. And oftentimes when that's how it happens though, right? It's very kind of slick, very kind of almost catches you off
It's a
guard.
microaggression.
Yeah. Yeah.
Micro.
It's very, and I couldn't even imagine why that was her thought process. Like what, why does she think that? Yeah. Why would somebody think that? I don't know. Like
I
I
I
don't
don't
have
know.
that mindset. So I just, yeah, it's hard like to kind of fathom too, like growing up in urban areas where we grew up in, where it, because the Bay Area is a huge melting pot as well. So,
Mhm.
I just couldn't ever imagine a time, in my high school, there was about 4,000 kids when I was in high school.
4,000 kids in one school?
It was insane. It still is insane. Like I think there's about close to 4,000 now. Like when my
That
son
is
graduated,
crazy.
and in my high school growing up, Caucasian was a minority.
Wow, really? That's
There was
crazy.
there was Asians, Hispanics, African Americans. I mean, it was, to me, when I moved out to Washington, and this is my story about moving when I first moved out to Washington. When I first moved out to Washington, girl, I had just gotten married. I had just had a kid. I still wasn't like, I was still struggling with, my past and healing, and not even healing from that, like just dealing, right? Like just dealing with my past, dealing with the marriage I was in, dealing with just having a newborn. And I
You
just,
moved up here with a newborn?
He was 10 months old when we moved up
Wow.
there. Yeah. And I just thought in my head that I just wanted to get out of California. And Washington just seemed safe for me because I didn't know anybody.
Mm.
I just wanted to be in an area where I didn't have to worry. I had so many PTSD moments when I moved out to Washington that looking back now, I go, wow, that was really unnecessary.
Hmm.
Like for example, I would go to Target. And like I said, I just felt safe, right? Maybe because I was blissfully unaware of if there were um gangs and crime and things like that, like how it was out there. I had no clue. I just assumed it had to be better than California. It had to be better than the Bay Area. It had to be safer, right? And so I was in Target and I was putting my kid in a car seat, and a woman came up to me, and I was in between. There was a car next to me, so you know, when I got out of the car and I turned around and I see her standing there, she was asking for money. I didn't really hear what she had said. All I know is when I came up from the car and I looked, there was a person standing there, and I just went off, because to me that was like, you are,
Way in
I
your
didn't
space.
see, you way in my space. I didn't see you standing there. I didn't hear you coming. You know what I mean? So like complete PTSD. And I got in the car and I was shaking. I was pissed. I was like, I wanted to punch her for just even being near me.
Yeah. You probably
Like,
should have.
don't do that. Like, don't do that. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
don't do that. and so when I first got there, I was just kind of getting my thing. And I think that was around the time that my son was getting a lot of ear infections and, sick sinus issues. So I kept having to take him into like his doctor's office. And I remember going on a Saturday and so I had to go to Bellevue to the doctor's office, their doctor's office there. And signed him in, had a conversation with the nurse. She called our name. We went in there talking to her about what was going on, and she says to me before she walks out, "Do you need a translator?" And I said, "Why? Does she not speak English?" I like, just because my last name is Lopez, and I'm talking to her like I'm talking to you now. Like, it's not, how, why? And then as my son started getting into school and daycares and things like that, I'm noticing more and more that it's predominantly Caucasian, predominantly, and I'm not used to that. And I'm like,
Right.
where are all the people of color at? Where'd they go? So it was
You had nobody tell you.
I no, I didn't. I just knew that Seattle looked like a beautiful place. Also, when I went to
Beautiful.
check it out, it was in the summertime.
Oh yeah, of course.
So
When
sorry,
I
was
first met you,
instantly
you were wearing
fooled.
your jacket.
Was Yes, and was instantly fooled because I was like, "Oh my gosh, it's so cold here." I remember being in my jacket and my flip-flops and like like typical California girl, gotta have her flip-flops on. No, I mean, it was definitely, I still was just like, I'm gonna give this a try. I'm just gonna, hang out here because like I said, I just felt safer there at the
Yeah.
time. So with all the experiences that you have, is there anything that comes to mind that for a young Latina or Afro-Latina that maybe isn't finding her community, or maybe she's growing up in an area that she's not finding representation of her culture? Is there
Mm,
something that
man,
I know it's so hard
it's really
because
hard. It's really hard I mean, I, I sought it out all the time in Seattle. Like I'm constantly looking for, even, pre-internet, still like reading the Seattle Weekly and looking for, that's how I met Maria Rodriguez actually. There was this organization called Solo Parenting Alliance. I was a single parent, she was a single parent, and we met, we went to this meeting, and we and we decided to try and like live together. But when we went looking at apartments, we realized no way can we live together. And that's probably why we're still friends, because we never
Oh
lived
yeah.
together.
That's probably good. Yeah.
But I was constant, if I saw that a new restaurant would open, oh, there's a Puerto Rican restaurant. Can't. I always lived in the North End. So it was always like,
Yeah.
ugh. So I was always, seeking it out. And then when Petra, who when
Oh
Petra
yeah.
moved to Seattle,
Hmm.
I 2000 something, I forget the year. Then I had my girl from the Bronx, also
Yeah.
Afro-Latina, and we would
Yep.
try and do something to keep the culture going, but it's hard.
Yeah, it
It
is.
should
It
be
can
easy.
be.
It should be easier. I would think that it would be easier for the younger generation because there's so much more diverse multiculturally,
And a lot of talk about inclusion. Yeah.
yeah, but I
They just, I mean, I feel like
what are you hearing?
I feel like we just have to consistently remind people, or women, especially women, that the empowerment comes within. But
Absolutely.
I know it's so hard when you don't have anybody representing, especially if you have parents who aren't necessarily empowered themselves,
Hmm.
and then you kind of grow up not knowing what that feels like, that looks like. It's having to maybe find whatever builds that fire in you.
Hmm.
And it doesn't, and for those that are maybe out there in a community or in an area where you kind of feel shunned for who you are, or feeling kind of misrepresented in any possible way, it's all about, it can be all about, that empowerment can be you teaching people, explaining
Absolutely.
to people, like sharing your story with people so that they can further understand. And like, I know a lot of people are kind of into them, like when your ego kind of gets in front of you and you just go, it's not my responsibility to teach, but like at the end of the day, maybe it should be, in a way, because people need to learn.
It's paying it forward in some
It
way.
is. It's also paying it forward, yeah, for the path for the next person.
Even though, as Gen X, we are all kinds of fucked up and
All kinds, all kinds.
probably shouldn't be giving any kind of advice. But
I agree with that, because
other than
I mean, we are
try
just,
to not give a fuck about
yeah,
every single thing. I think that
yeah.
I think social media has destroyed our culture
Mhm.
because everybody with the quick fix and have to go to social media and all the disinformation and misinformation. And it's just trying to live up to somebody else's expectation of what you should look like or sound like or be like, and it's just hard for them, man. I mean, we didn't have to deal with that. We were just like,
Mhm.
I don't know.
Yeah, it's a lot of,
It's too much
it's
pressure.
it's a lot of pressure, because it's a lot of giving a fuck about what other people think about you.
Right. And that's the last thing.
Mhm.
But the thing is that it's hard to
Yep,
say that to them
right.
from
As they're
us
going
as
through it.
already exactly, because we as 50 something year olds we can look back and go, oh man, if I could tell that 14-year
To
old
my,
girls,
yeah,
oh
if I could just give her all the secrets, right? Like, none of this shit matters.
yeah,
Like,
i
you know,
want i want young women to start empowering each other too,
yeah. There
and
there
really
needs to
start
be,
there needs to
yeah,
be less there needs to be
of the
more
cattiness.
solidarity. Yeah, there needs to be more solidarity.
I agree, because oftentimes it is other people trying to tell us how we should be with other women, because
Mm.
right, we're often told that other women are,
The
um
culebras, there's watch your man, or you
right,
know
they're the threat, the other women's are the threat. And it's like, no, even if it's another woman that went and slept with your man, it is so often that the women get mad at
the
each
other
other.
woman. Yeah.
Yeah, instead of the fool whose responsibility it was to maintain you know, his relationship with the woman he chose to be with, and not go
Yeah,
around and, but it's the infighting that we have often seen so many times in movies and television. It's the us trying to pit each, you know, like you're supposed to pit each other, and like who told us that? Other men,
exactly.
right?
Right,
It's always the other, and
right.
and they do that, so we do keep that infighting, so we do have that um kind of trying to be better than the rest, instead of just lifting and empowering us all
Right.
together as a whole,
If we
because they don't
empower,
want that. They
they
don't
don't want
want
that
that.
big, because what is the most scary thing to a
Empowered
weak
women,
man? There you
empowered
go.
women,
Now
empowered
you get
women.
all of us together.
We fuck some shit up. Look, you know, and it's not even just, this is not even just a US problem. This is like a
Mhm.
worldwide problem.
Abso-fucking-lutely.
They purposely keep us in our place, and this is one of the ways they keep us in our, try to keep us in our place, because they don't want us
Yeah.
empowered and uprising and doing shit. Girl, we would turn this fucking world inside out. Like, I don't know who came up with the whole dynamic. I don't know how many centuries ago this goes back. You know, not only just the dynamic of men having to control women, but it's also the dynamic of the hierarchy. You know, just because you have no money, you have no power, you have no say, right?
Right.
And
Well,
it's
they're trying to take us back to
right
that.
back there.
What?
Yeah.
No, I think that if we stay together, I mean, the
Mm-hmm.
beautiful thing is that I think that inherently women want to love each other and want to,
I agree.
there's some power that is telling us that male power,
Right.
because it's so beautiful when we do stick together.
It is. It
And
really is.
it's
When you go to any of those empowerment type sessions, you know, women's retreats or things like that, like just the energy that is in that space in that moment with all these women, it's like it is so powerful. And to be able, like, I would love to see a day where that energy is spilled out into the streets. It is not just confined to a conference room. It's not confined to any kind of event center. It is literally just in our community at all times, just that energy flowing around us.
Mhm.
I dream of the day that I hope that we're alive when that happens. I would love to see that day.
I hope so
Um,
too, girl.
yeah, because that's exactly what this world needs. They
We
need
did-
us empowered women to be out there in this world and to be teaching others that may not be, you know, like those small towns, those rural areas, you know, that we need to be out there teaching them, like, this is the new dawn. It's a new dawn of the day, or whatever that's saying.
I hear you, sister. It's about
So
solidarity. I've always felt strongly about that. It's like we don't helping somebody along the way, just it feels good. I
yeah.
I I think that we should just intentionally, I made a point of the next time someone pays me a compliment. This happens, I'm running around. I was at Trader Joe's the other day and I'm running around. I was wearing these glasses.
Mm-hmm. I
And
like
I'm
those
running
glasses.
around and this girl stopped me. She stopped, she came from behind and said, "Hi, oh, I just wanted to tell you I love your glasses." And I was like, "Oh, thank you." And
Right.
I got in my car
Mm-hmm.
and I was like, I was having a shitty day. I realized
Oh,
that I was having a shitty day. And then she said something so nice. And I
yeah.
didn't even have the decency to just take it in and really enjoy it.
Right.
And I felt bad. And I was
Well,
like, I told myself, you know what? Next time someone stops their day to pay me a compliment, I'm
right.
going to stop and in the moment really say, thank you.
Well, and it's not for them, it's for you, right? To really accept, because that's you accepting the compliment. That's you saying, I accept that you
Yeah,
told me that.
which is right, which
Yeah.
has always been hard, but actually it is for
Mhm.
me. But it's, I just want to, like I said, they didn't have to do that.
No.
Um, they don't know that that meant something to me after the fact.
Right.
And that's why I told myself that next time I will stop and I will, if I
Accept
had
it.
the
Yeah.
forethought, then I would have said, thank you so much. You have no idea how much that means to me. I'm having a really shitty day, but thank you. And then,
Yeah.
just because then they go off and they'll do something nice again to somebody
Yeah.
else because
Yeah.
of that effect.
Yeah. Right.
I'm gonna
It's
cry.
contagious. Oh.
It is contagious.
Yeah, it's contagious. And that's the way to pay it forward.
Yeah.
Right. They just to keep that
Just
momentum going.
small things.
Yeah.
Again,
The
there was a woman
smallest
in the
thing.
scooter and she would just reach over and grab something and just and keep walking. You don't gotta spend a whole bunch of time. Or I love
No.
that
Yeah.
there's this one thing that I see on Instagram all the time. It's like with New Yorkers, they don't even talk. Like if somebody's trying to go down the subway stairs and they got a subway a stroller,
Mhm.
somebody just automatically comes and picks up the stroller and then boom boom boom, you're walking down the stairs. It's just automatic, and they're
Yeah.
not expecting a thank you or thank you. It's just let's keep. It's really a New Yorker saying, "Let's keep it moving."
Yeah. Like, here, let me help you so you don't be fucking it up. Yeah. Everybody else. Yeah.
But yeah, so if that's just small things that I think that everybody could do, especially women to each other,
Yeah.
and
I agree.
just pay somebody a compliment.
Yeah.
It means so much.
And honestly, as women, we are very good with our intuition.
Yes.
So oftentimes we can tell if another woman doesn't look like she's feeling herself, or maybe it looks like she's kind of out of her element and is, nervous or something. We can oftentimes tell. And so just by taking those small steps, like you said, to
And that
empower
would,
other women,
yeah,
and it doesn't take much, right?
yeah,
It doesn't take much. It's just being kind and being
yeah.
safe
Be
and
kind of
being
being
in a
safe.
safe person.
And that's a good segue for when that would be a good segue for when we could talk about what those signs look like when
Yeah.
someone is going through something that may prompt you to say, are you okay?
Right. Right. So, or just even, I don't know what it is that you need right now, but I hope that you're doing okay. Or I hope
Yes.
that whatever it is, you can move
Yeah.
on from it,
Yeah.
because how often, like you said, you were having a bad day. How often are people having a bad day?
Yeah.
I mean, in this
Having
society,
a
in this
bad day and
culture.
putting on a smile, right? They having well, putting on that smile, and then somebody
Mm,
pays you a compliment. You're like, oh, thank you. And then you get in your car and you're like,
yeah, exactly.
I say something more to her.
But and I think that's it too, because I don't think that the ones that are out there paying it forward, giving those compliments, honestly, like, I know when I do it, I don't really expect much from that other person. I just want to let them know,
Yes,
right?
absolutely.
And I feel like that's that way with a lot of people who do that. They
Yeah.
just want the person to know. They don't
Yeah.
expect, like, oh my God, let me take you out to dinner. You know,
Yeah.
let me buy you this really expensive bottle of tequila to, you know what I mean? Because you
Yeah.
cheered me up, even though that would be nice.
Yeah.
But yeah,
There are perils in that too. I'll tell you my different Trader Joe's story another time.
it was so great talking with you, Maritza.
Thank
I think
you.
this was such an
It was
amazing
fun.
topic to talk about, not only your Afro-Latina roots and how you became to be this beautiful person in front of me today,
Oh, thank you.
but also just, how we can further empower our sisters out there, for sure. So
Absolutely.
thank you
Thank you
for
so
joining
much.
me.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for listening to Medusa's Awakening podcast. Stay up to date on new episodes by following, liking, and subscribing to our pages. We are on Instagram at Medusas_Awakening, on YouTube at Medusa's Awakening, and on TikTok at Awakening_Medusa_podcast.